welcome to another episode of the Emerging Markets Entrepreneur. My name is Alex Knieps, founder of Printulu, and please welcome with me my co-host Sid Wahi, director of Forbes Africa, and today a special guest, Vusi Thembekwayo. Vusi, Sid, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Alex.
Really appreciate it.
All right, great. Vusi, many of you, know you, but for some people that do not know you from some of your inspirational videos, I just want to give a quick intro. You are a global speaker, a leadership expert, an author, a VC, a father. You are a lot of things. You've become an expert in a lot of things, and I think that's really great and really inspirational. And maybe you can give a quick intro into how you have become an expert in so many different fields and what other people can learn from it.
Yeah, I followed the path of curiosity. I think the most important thing you can do as a professional in the world today is just be curious. Curious about what's changing, curious about what's next, curious about what you could learn. And so if you follow that path, it tends to lead you down this meandering road towards the better version of you, right? So the work I do in leadership, the work I do in venture capital, the work I do as a speaker, all of it is just because I'm curious about how things work.
It's very interesting that you say that. It's a common theme amongst a lot of the people that we have been speaking to is curiosity. Curiosity is what drives a lot of people, and it's not money or fame or anything else. It's just being curious all the time that gets them to achieve excellence. Sorry, Alex, I cut you off. You were about to ask a question there.
Yeah, no problem. It is very interesting, but now, is curiosity, is it a necessary or sufficient condition? I just want to put in a quote here from Napoleon Hill, and he says, "It is literally true that you can succeed best and quickest by helping others to succeed." How true has that been for you, Vusi?
Yeah, in fact, you can only succeed by helping others to succeed. There's no other way, right? So if you really think about what we do as entrepreneurs and people that build businesses, is we're looking for places where there is a market gap, some sort of efficiency, whether it's a customer service or price or customer experience or speed, but we're always looking for a gap somewhere. And around that gap, we pivot and build a value proposition. And then we price that value proposition attractively to attract customers. That's actually what we do. So if you move from that hypothesis, then you can only build a business by serving people. You can't build a business any other way.
Okay, great. I think, Sid, you in particular, you have a lot of questions about how the market has changed that entrepreneurs are pivoting on. Maybe you take over and ask Vusi about all the questions that you have, Sid.
So thanks, Alex. So Vusi, let's talk a little bit about what's been happening over the last couple of months. We've seen something that's never happened, at least in my lifetime, with this global pandemic. We went into lockdown, everybody was panicking, economy shut down. And now, as of, I think, as of Sunday, actually, 20th September, South Africa goes back into level one, goes into level one, not back into level one. And things are opening up. So how has the journey been for you? And what are you seeing in the market? What have you seen in the marketplace and what are you seeing now?
It's a good question. So first, how's the journey been? It's been interesting because there's been both negatives and positives. I think on the negative side, one of the things I realized was the assumptions we had going into this just didn't hold true, right? So everybody had an assumption. How long would it last? Could we sustain the period of it lasting, right? So And what we've realized is all of those assumptions were wrong. And around that, we've had to make very difficult business decisions. Some of those decisions has been around how do you downsize? How do you outsource parts of your businesses or parts of your business, which in the past used to be insourced and you thought about them as a core part of your business. And now you're actually going, well, the core part of your business is X and everything else we can outsource so that we have a variable costing model, right? So I think for me on the one side, that's what's been happening. On the positive side, I cannot believe how many opportunities there are out there. It's absolutely unbelievable. And there's a lot of opportunity because there's a lot of panic, right? Now, if you study history, Sid, you'll like this thought. If you study history, wealth is created during three conditions, either through war, or economic recession and depression or economic booms, but like super booms. Super booms happen so rarely that first you have to be in the capital markets, traditionally holding equity shares to participate in the growth. And then you have to be in the stock that's going to grow at a super rate to make market beating returns. So the odds of that are almost nil. Wars, we haven't had real major global wars, not for the past 80, 90 years. We've had wars in that time, but not real major global wars that have a continental global scale. That hasn't happened, which means it leaves only the other potential: market crashes, market chaos, market booms. There's a reason for that. When there's a market crash, what happens is people see the downside and the downside only. So asset prices drop, business owners want to liquidate their equity and get that money in cash and hold on to cash. And as a consequence of that, you get really decent businesses in decent markets with decent products going for a song, but like a ridiculous discount. On my desk, I'm currently sitting on 11 different businesses that we're thinking about whether or not we could buy. One of them at 42% the price we would have bought it at this time last year. But the market isn't 42% the size it was this time last year, right? So that for me has been the major learning, has been what you have to learn if you want to really make money and if you want to succeed is you have to see things differently. So it's not that your reality is different, it's that how you're seeing reality is different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer. So let's talk a little bit about what you said from the on the opportunities. And that's one thing I love about this show is that everyone we speak to is the eternal optimist, always looking for opportunities in crises. What are some of the specifics that you've seen? And maybe you can use this opportunity to talk a little bit about digital transformation and how that's been something that's been accelerated over the last couple of months.
Well, so let me answer your question this way, right? So in our firm, we always thought of ourselves as a mid-market VC firm, right? And the thing about being a mid-market VC firm is it doesn't necessarily mean that you are into tech sector or any specific sector. It talks about the type and stage of business that you're in. Just before COVID, we started having internal conversations around whether or not we needed to think about the future of our business and making a future of our business sector specific. Then when COVID hit, something very interesting happened, Sid. All our technology businesses just shot the lights out. Even the ones we were thinking about closing 3 months prior. So there was some that we were just like, look, we got into this business with a particular hypothesis. The hypothesis hasn't worked out. The market hasn't responded the way we thought it would. You didn't get market traction. You're not getting market share. And blah, 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 blah. All of the tech fundamentals along which you build a tech value stock weren't holding. So like, well, maybe we need to exit, right? Maybe we need to get out. Mm-hmm. And you know that everybody sees it the same way when you're in a syndicated deal. You're one of 5 investors in the business and everybody's seeing it the same way. Everybody's like, it's not working out. COVID hits and all of a sudden this thing is 200-300% of the volume that you were expecting at that time, purely because people have gone online and people are now using tech platforms, right? So what we're busy doing right now, actually, we're busy with our second fund cap raise, is we're pivoting our fund cap raise to a tech-enabled, a Pan-African VC firm. So we're thinking about ourselves as a company that plays in the mid-market tier, that looks for technology opportunities to disrupt both consumer and industrial companies, right? And we believe that that's where the growth is going to be.
Well said. Have you seen any interesting pivots in some of the businesses that maybe didn't make it or were trying to make it?
Yeah, so it's a good question. The first one has been rationalization, right? So one of the things that happens around periods of abundance is we always convince ourselves we need more people, more offices, more customers, more products, right? We always convince ourselves we need more. What we've learned and what we've seen has been there's been a period of rationalization. So it's actually fewer people, fewer products, fewer offices, but more efficiency. And one of the things fewer gives you is speed. right? Which is the second pivot. So the first pivot has been less, right? Fewer. If you had 10 products, you've rationalized down to 3. If you had 3, you've rationalized down to 1. Because actually what you realized is there was always one product that was making you money. And you were taking the margin from that product to feed into these other products, convincing yourself the market needs something it doesn't. The second pivot has been how quickly people are moving. Decisions that used to take 6 months are taking 6 days, right? And decisions that used to take a year are taking 3 months. Because people are realizing the market is moving so fast that the hypothesis you were using to make decisions isn't necessarily the hypothesis that's working now. So if you're going to test something, you have to test it now, because if you don't test it now, then you're going nowhere.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of organizations need to foster a culture of experimentation and not be afraid to fail. But if they do fail, they must fail cheaply and fail quickly.
You know, we talk very glibly about this culture of experimentation and failing, right? But you'd be very, very surprised how hard that is for bigger businesses to do. Very surprised. And if you think about it, there's a reason for that, right? So we build the world of business around the idea of risk and reward, right? And a part of that idea of risk and reward is choice and consequence. So as an executive, you can make whatever decision you want as long as you're willing to live with the consequences. Mm-hmm. So when you say to executives and big teams, create a culture of experimentation and failing, it's hard to do because it means that people can have the choice and not carry the downside risk or the consequence. Human beings, by their very nature, love lynch mobs. It's who we are. Something goes wrong, somebody has to fall by the sword, right? And one of the things we forget is that if we keep doing that over and over again, the messaging to people isn't don't do the wrong thing. The messaging to people becomes don't do the new thing. Mm-hmm. Because if it's not new, it can't be wrong. And so this is often why organizations get stuck doing the old things, the old way, and they don't move. It's because anytime somebody tries something new and it doesn't succeed, rather than as celebrate it or learn from it, what we do is we want to lynch that person and say, this is the person that failed. They made the errors. Just quickly on this, Sid, think about it. When you go to a business school, right? The very idea of a business case is the point I'm making. So they give you a business case, and often in the business case, there is an executive who had a choice to make, or an executive team that had a series of choices to make, and the executive or executive team that made the wrong choices often was asked to leave. That's what we're taught in business. And at the same time, you're taught, oh, but go and experiment. Well, you can't have both, right? You can't punish people for trying something new and then say to people, why aren't you doing the new thing? People are going to follow the path of least resistance and the path of least risk.
Absolutely. And I guess that's why you have an ecosystem with large businesses and startups, and they keep each other in check.
Yeah, Vusi, I think it's very interesting, but don't you have to keep a balance also there? Because if certain actions of people prohibit you to do another experiment, then how can you as a leader, business owner, entrepreneur incentivize that type of behavior?
So it's not to say that there shouldn't be consequence. It is to say that the consequence should be consistent with the philosophy of the business, right? I'm going to give you an example. So here in South Africa, you guys might not be aware, but one of the large pharmaceutical companies published an ad about a week or two ago, which people felt was a racist ad, right?
Yeah, the Clicks ad.
The Clicks ad, yeah, we saw that.
Yeah.
Right? So Clicks publishes the ad, right? But the product owner is Unilever, right? Mm. Now, most people don't know, but one of the cardinal pillars at Unilever is fail. Unilever want you to fail. It's how Unilever was built. Unilever was built by people who try new products in new markets all the time, right? It's reason why Unilever has managed to innovate and to bring new products into new markets, right? And what happens over time, Alex, is there is an averaging out of the effect of failure. So if you have one product in a market that fails, you feel it at that moment. But over a 10-year span, the products that succeed average out the failures, right? So it's like if you ran like a mathematical model, it aggregates out, right? And then the products that succeed generally generate a return in perpetuity that makes up for the failures anyway. Now, the ad gets published. The product is a Unilever product. And I have it on good authority. Internally at Unilever, some people start calling for the heads of the product owner and the marketing teams. Now, you got to imagine it. You're the executive at Unilever. You run the business. You've had conferences over the past 10 years telling people, be innovative, do something new. Somebody does something new, there's a huge social media backlash, and you fire them. You now have to consider whether or not there isn't the irony is not the wrong word, but that you're not being inconsistent, right? And that's often the fine line that many business executives have to straddle, right? So it's literally the difference between the rogue trader and the trader that made the wrong trade. And both of them can have the same quantum in effect, but they have very two different intentions. And sometimes we don't give ourselves time and enough perspective to deal with the intent because we're caught in the heat, in the moment. But you're not actually going, well, what was the intent here? What was the person trying to do? And maybe we can deal with how they did it later. We can deal with the mechanistic way of how they did it later. But let's look at the intent. So for instance, the clicks ad is a great example. Was the person publishing the ad deliberately intending to be racist? That's a separate question to, was the ad racist, right? And we can deal with those in different ways, because if there was a deliberate intent to be racist, then you treat it one way. But if the ad is racist, then you treat that in a different way, right? It might be that the person themselves is not aware that what they were doing is racist, right? And again, just a quick point in this, I don't want to hop on about it, but we as humanity today do ourselves a big disservice by living in this culture of cancel culture, where we cancel everybody that doesn't fit the aggregate of society. And the reason we do ourselves a disservice is it doesn't mean that if you cancel people who are outliers, that those people no longer exist. It simply means that those people go into the deep recesses of their dark spaces. And that's why you have the dark web where things happen, right? So if you really want to shine a light on humanity and include more people, then the path of education and enlightenment is better than the path of punishment and the path of chastising and the path of cancellation. But that's my own personal view. It's not a particularly popular view, but that's my view.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think for me, I would not even say that I'm able to judge it, because it really depends on what are the rules of the game of Unilever that they laid out for their team. If for example, is you can innovate and you can do whatever you want, but the rule is you don't damage our brand. Then, then it's a different story.
But Alex, think about that. Can you innovate without there being brand? I mean, because you can't separate the action of the business from the brand that the business is, right? So even if, and I'll tell you why that's an important point to make, because if you say innovate and if you succeed, we succeed, a part of that success is brand growth. Right? The business and the brand are tethered. But if you say innovate, just don't damage our brand. Do you know what's going to happen? You're not going to get innovation. What you're going to get is like this small, micro, tinkering, incremental stuff where rather than introduce a new product, people introduce a new feature. And it's just like, well, I mean, making Coca-Cola a different flavor is very different to reimagining Coca-Cola, right? And then what happens is over time, the share price growth doesn't keep up with market growth. Institutional investors get really, really uptight about not getting the right return on capital. They start putting executives under pressure going, you're getting left behind the curve of innovation. The executives going, well, we're innovating, what do you mean? but actually they're not innovating. They're just adding features, right? So they were a bank that had one bank account. Now they've got 5 bank accounts. They were charging 3 cents for an account. Now they're charging 2 cents an account. That's not innovation, not in the real sense of it. So it's often why I think people misinterpret Facebook's mantra of move fast and break things, right? Because it doesn't serve us now. Facebook mantra of move fast and break things doesn't serve us in a world where Facebook is publishing media to 2 billion people. It doesn't serve us. So you hear people going, well, Facebook is really irresponsible. They should be taking charge of what's being published. Yeah, sure. But Facebook is a technology business that's built to introduce new product at a rapid scale. Any business that's like that, any system like that, regulation will always be outpaced by innovation. It's the way it works. And anytime you find an environment where regulation is ahead of innovation, all that happens is there's no innovation taking place, you know? So for me, it was interesting to watch that whole clicks thing, because I thought it's a very interesting management case study about how we often as organizations say one thing, but when the heat of the thing we say faces us, we actually default to the something else.
Mm. It's interesting, but let's get back. Let me challenge you on this a little bit. Isn't it possible to say we're doing this, but we are, in order to limit the brand exposure, we're limiting the ad, the thing to a certain pre-group before you launch the whole campaign? I mean, there are mechanisms to say, you know, I mean, Facebook is doing the same thing. Facebook is not releasing new features on 2 billion, 3 billion people. They're releasing features on 1,000 people, 5,000 people, 10,000 people, 50,000 people, 100,000 people, and so on and so forth. So the question remains for me is, you know, the collateral damage wouldn't have been that big if it would have been in one click store. Maybe it would have, but you know, that's a different thing. If all the other click stores would have had different ads, and I think that's where you can, in my opinion, have an experimental frame and a culture, but still have certain rules of the game in place to limit collateral damage.
Let me tell you why that's difficult. Technology businesses, right? And you know, I've done enough tech investments to know this is a fact. Technology businesses are built around the idea of the MVP, the minimum viable product. What happens is you come up with a minimum viable product. You then have what we call a sample population, right?
Yeah.
And you release the minimum viable product to the sample population. So Facebook releasing a like button to 20,000 people in Kuala Lumpur is a part of the DNA of how Facebook releases product, right? Yeah. That's not the way 100-year-old Unilever is built. Unilever doesn't have minimum viable product. They don't have sample case groups. That's not how, they're not built like a technology organization, first. The second thing for you to consider, and I just want you to think about this, is this. You can only frame a risk. You can only frame a risk if you understand the context. If you don't understand the context, you can't frame the risk. This is I'll give you a great way to think about this. In the year prior to 9/11, the year prior to those planes flying into the Twin Towers, the United States spent a record level of amount on arms. But what they did is they spent money buying arms for conventional warfare. Then what happened is planes flew into buildings. So you can only frame a risk for a context and an environment that you understand. The difficulty for many executives, Alex, and that's why I love the point you're making, the difficulty for many executives is realizing that the context that they're playing in is not their context they grew up in. That's the difficulty. So if you're whether you're a Unilever executive or a banking executive or a Clicks executive, it's realizing that you might have 30 years pharma experience, 30 years FMCG experience. But guess what? Pharma and FMCG over the past 30 years in Africa, in South Africa, means very, very different things. And if you're not tuned into the context, the environment, right, you're always going to miss it. And that's when these flare-ups happen.
So you're basically talking about the unknown unknowns, and these become bigger in a changing environment, basically, because the more the environment changes and the more executives have to deal with this complex changes of A is changing here, B is changing here, the more complex it becomes. But isn't it even more important in that scenario to set even those rules of the game, to say we're limiting the brand, and this is obviously understanding where Unilever is coming from. Unilever is an old company, but isn't that then maybe the right way for Unilever to say now, okay, maybe we don't have to punish that particular person if it wasn't intentional, as you say. But in order to avoid this in the future, we need to have structural change in order to react to the market that is 100%. Changing so rapidly that as an organization, need to change as well.
So what I was going to say is, if you read John Kotter's work, and John Kotter in my mind is probably one of the best, he's one of the foremost management thinkers in the world today. And one of his books, I forget the name now, but he's got the book that talks about the network organization. And the point he makes is a very simple one. The way organizations are built has been the way civilizations have found a way to be efficient, right? Since man walking out of caves. And if you got to remember, the first complex mechanism that mankind had to manage was warfare. It was the first time one person was in charge of many people doing the same thing. One tribe was fighting another tribe, and one guy was in charge, and he had to organize people, right? And so the idea of one guy in charge organizing many people, this pyramid structure, is built into how organizations, into how human beings organize themselves anytime they're in a complex mechanism. So think about a small business. What happens the minute it becomes a medium-sized business and the minute it becomes a large business? The founder becomes the manager, becomes the director, becomes the CEO, becomes the chairman. He gets further removed and he builds this bigger and bigger pyramid, because that's how we human beings organize. What we've learned over the past 15 years, say, from technology businesses. So think about the FANGs here: Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Google, Netflix, right? Is what they've done is they've got the pyramid structure for the corporate element of the business. So compliance, risk, reporting, legal, right? Mm-hmm. But then for the technical and technological aspects of the business, they've got this network structure where you'll find Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, part of a coding team. That's why people didn't understand why you would have Bill Gates working on a product launch when he was the chairman of Microsoft. It's because they'd separated the corporate structure, right, from the network structure of the organization. So I think what a lot of these businesses have to do today is a lot of these business executives have to create two businesses. You need Unilever corporate, right, where the guy can be the CEO and have this massive corporate structure. But when it comes to these type of things, market innovations, new product, new releases, new campaigns, you need a King Arthur round table where the intern, the marketing intern, the social media intern, the CFO and the CEO have an equal say in the discussion of a particular product. And the truth is, that's just not the way these organizations are built. So what people actually look at as for what people are going, well, the organization is racist. I'm going, well, I don't know if that's true. I mean, I don't know. That may be true. I don't know if it is. What I know for sure is that there is a problem of the structure for the purpose of the organization today. So if you say we want to be innovative, then you got to make sure that you rethink how you're organized so that you can innovate. And, you know, it really is about how do you take risks but not throw away the chicken with the eggs.
Or that you row in the right direction and you row very fast, right? Because the Unilever structure will make sure that you row very, very fast, and the network structure will make sure that you row in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is what people don't realize, right? So people often say, geez, big businesses are slow. Yeah, it's in there, it's how big things work. Like, just, excuse me, think logically. What's the difference between a heavyweight champion boxer and a welterweight champion boxer? Speed. That's it. The welterweight is much, much faster. I tell you what though, if that heavyweight lands one punch, just one, the debate is over, right? So what happens with a lot of like what happens with like a lot of big businesses, right, is it becomes big. It's the Titanic, right? And it's so big that if it chooses a direction and moves down that direction, it's unstoppable, right? So what you need is you need the ability to pivot and change direction quickly, like a speedboat, but you need the impact of a Titanic. So when you land the punch, it's got to feel like the punch of a heavyweight boxer, right? And I think that's where many executives really need to just start connecting themselves with the way startups work. Because the way startups work is startups can pivot very quickly, make a decision on Monday, Tuesday, we're trying it. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're getting market intel. Next Monday, we're making a decision about whether or not we're keeping that product, right? We can move very quickly. But what a big business gives you, what Unilever has, gents, is it's present in all the continents of the world. Yeah. So whereas a startup can create a fantastic new product, a Unilever can create an average product, but it has global distribution. See, the punch is much, much bigger. And so I think we've always thought about these two worlds as like dichotomous, right? Like that the one can't exist with the other. What we're actually learning is that the modern organization is both. You need to be a bit of a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. You literally need the Superman Clark Kent. You've got to have both inside your organization. And if you don't have that, one of two things is going to happen. You're either going to have a very big, efficient business that's low growth, or you're going to have a very high growth, high risk business that's low distribution. And both of those get stuck somewhere.
I was just wondering if you got the analogy for the boxer from the picture of Floyd Mayweather behind me, but
I didn't. No, but now that you mentioned it,
it's right there. It's sitting right there. Guys, I'm a little bit cognizant of the amount of time that we've taken discussing the Unilever clicks issue. So I think we have time for one or two more questions. Alex, let's focus a little bit on the advice for entrepreneurs, maybe.
Yeah,
sure.
I think going into what we've discussed is, I think, Vusi, when do you think is it time to build those two separate organizations, in your opinion? And maybe on top of that, you can mention what type of characteristics, focus points, what have you seen that entrepreneurs should really embrace and drive in these times?
It's a great question. That is a fantastic question. I'll tell you why that's a good question, because I'm currently going through exactly what we're talking about. So what happens is this, right? So first, you start. Many founders and entrepreneurs will understand this. You have a hypothesis, you start, you have a sample case, you launch the product to a few people, you test it, you get feedback, you iterate, you get better, you test, you get feedback, iterate, get better, test, feedback. And you just keep following this constant loop, right? And sooner or later, what happens is you hit the humdinger. You literally get a 6 in the cricket pitch, boundary line, right? And then this product starts delivering rapid levels of growth. And what happens for many founders is they go from being founders to managers, right? So what happens now is your time allocation changes. Now you're allocating time to more administrative tasks. Now you're worried about IT. You're worried about risk. You start worrying about compliance. You start worrying about HR. You start having meetings you weren't having, nor intending to have when you started the business. At that point, you need to start building the organization to manage those issues so that you don't manage them. The problem with many founders is they suffer from what I call the I-do syndrome. The I-do syndrome is nobody does it better than I do. So what happens is they go, well, I need to sort out these compliance issues. I'm not gonna, if I keep hiring people and they get it wrong, so I'm just gonna do it myself, right?
Can relate to that.
Yeah, and it's very alluring, right? Because it's like, well, it's taking too long. It's costing me money. These consultants are taking forever. I've fired 4 or 5 people doing the same thing because they keep getting it wrong. I'm just going to do it myself, man. And then you do it yourself. But then you go from a founder to an innovator to an administrator. And here's the trick, Alex. The change is so gradual, you completely miss it. It's not like you wake up one day and you're an administrator. But then at a point in time, you look at your calendar and you go, but hold on, why am I always in meetings that are problem-solving meetings, right? Mm-hmm. So the second trick for entrepreneurs is if you find yourself in what I call Barack Obama meetings, You're now an administrator. And here's what Barack Obama meetings are. I watched this interview once they had with Barack Obama, and they said to him, how does it feel being the president? And he answered the question this way. He says, the job of the president is you only get brought the file that everybody else has had on their table and has not been able to resolve. In other words, nobody brings you the low-hanging fruit. You're the president. So by the time they bring you something, it's because it's been through the entire administrative system, and everybody either didn't have the authority, the intelligence, or the network to make a decision or fix it, and now it's sitting on your table. So if you as a founder start finding yourself in those Barack Obama meetings where everything has been escalated to you, you're an administrator now. You are no longer a founder. You are no longer an innovator. You are now an administrator. And that's the hard thing for many, many entrepreneurs to understand. So the trick is, at that time, you have to start building that second organization. And it takes work, it takes time, it takes constant testing and iteration. And the last point, and Sid will like this point. Most people go, yeah, tried that and I failed. Like, I tried that. I hired somebody, I hired a 2IC, I hired a COO, or I hired a CFO, or I had a head of legal, or and it just kept failing, and I had a second person, third person. Yeah. So basically what happens is you have to go through the same system of test and iteration, just with people. It's the same system. It's the same thing you were doing when you were building your little product. But all that's happening now is you're doing that with people. Is it more taxing? Yes, because human beings lie and they BS and they waste time and they cost a lot of money and yes, it's very taxing. The product doesn't work, you cut the product. Human being doesn't work, you can't just cut the human being. You've got to have performance management discussions, you've got to talk about expectations. I don't have the time. I just wanted to sell cookies. I just started a business because I wanted to sell cookies. I don't have time to be sitting here with you talking about performance management. You know what you're doing is wrong. Right? So a lot of us get impatient, but if you don't do that, you will not be able to unlock the next stage of growth for you.
Mm-hmm. Interesting part. I think every founder I've spoken to, every founder I've ever spoken to, whether it was in Mexico, Brazil, South Africa, Nigeria, faces that issue to some extent or the other. And every founder at some point is fed up with it. And to be fair, I don't think there's a magic bullet to it. I think if you want to be a founder, you got to go through that, what you are telling me. But I still think it's very difficult to manage because you're just speaking about product versus building that other level. I'm also considering costs, because building that level, that structure, that Unilever is a hell of a lot of fixed cost. And in COVID times, I went backwards here. I've become more of an administrator than I was before, unfortunately, because I was like, no, I don't need that person right now because I don't know what's going to happen. So I think there are, pardon?
You're talking to the choir. I completely understand where you are.
So I think there are a lot of complexities that founders have to take into considerations that make it extremely difficult. What helped me, and just to share that, is when there's really a problem, schedule in time in your calendar every day for a week, for at least 30 minutes with that person to fix it, and don't do it yourself. And that really changed a lot of things for me. You might waste time, you might, yes, but the person feels like you're investing in them. The person feels that you're investing in, that you're serious about it because you spend time every day. And after 1 week, you will see some sort of result, and that you can fuel to then motivate and get things going. And that really helped for me.
100%. I completely agree.
All right. Great. Any final advice maybe on the investment side, that you've seen great deals, changing investor behaviors that you would like to share with entrepreneurs, and maybe how they can get funding, maybe even from you?
So I think, one of the fallacies entrepreneurs have is they think great products attract funding. That's not true. It's just not true, right? There are, and I'm going to prove this to you. I'll prove it to you, right? There are car companies out there that make much faster cars, far more capable cars than Toyota. but they don't have Toyota's market cap, right? So the presumption many entrepreneurs make and many founders make is that better the quality of my product, the better my ability to attract investment. That's just not true. So if that's not true, then what does attract investment? Well, let me tell you what investors are looking for. Investors are interested in three things. The first thing they're interested in is traction, right? So I don't care that your product is amazing and would make the moon light up pink on a Thursday at 16 minutes past 7 if I lifted my phone and I used your filter. I just don't care. What I do care about is how many people care that your app can do that, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to demonstrate some sort of traction. Get people using it, get feedback from the market, from people, for consumers. Heck, give it away for free if you need to, but get some sort of traction. So that's the first thing that investors look for. The second thing that investors look for is a solid, capable, competent, technical team. Now, people hear team and they go, whoops, I'm alone. Yeah, you can be the team, right? You can. You shouldn't, but you can. The point about it is this. You've got to be capable, you've got to be competent, and most importantly, you've got to be technical. Many entrepreneurs I've seen make this mistake, where what happens is you have the idea, but you don't have the technical skill to build that idea. Now, if that's the case, the best advice I can give you is partner with technical people. Give away some equity in your idea and get technical people to work on the idea with you. The reason that's important is because if you think you're going to outsource the technical component of the product, what happens is your development costs far outstrip your traction. So your development costs are going up at imagine $100,000 every 6 months, but you're only attracting 400 or 500 new customers every 6 months. So when I, as the investor, run a cost per acquisition for a customer, I go, whoa, your customer acquisition cost is way too high. It's not really true. It's just that your cost structure is lopsided, right? So the reason Mark was able to build the Facebook, which became Facebook, was because he wrote down the cost of development to just him in a dorm and a meal. There was no salary built in, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, founders make that problem. And then the third thing, this is the one almost everybody misses, right? TAM, total addressable market. Investors love businesses that have a large total addressable market. What's that mean? It's this thing people call Chinese maths. You go to an investor and you go, dude, listen, I've found a way to make bicycles at 18% of the current cost of production of the most efficient bicycle in the world. And we're gonna make these bicycles and we're gonna sell them in China. Why China? Because there are 1 billion people in China and there are 1 billion bicycles, right? What did the investor just hear? The total addressable market is 1 billion. A big one in Africa right now is financial inclusion. That's why there's so many fintech startups, because everybody's thinking about this unbanked and underbanked market, this cash economy, and how do we take cash out of the system and bring people into the formal economy, right? So you hear stats like in South Africa, this is one I heard the other day. In South Africa, 1 in 7 people has a credit card. 1 in 7 people has a credit card. 7 in 8 people have a bank account. So if you're building a business that has a financial inclusion model that's pivoted on the bank account, not the credit card, the total addressable market is very different. So if you're going, well, how do I sell my product online? And I go, you need a credit card. I can only talk to 1 out of every 7 consumers. But if you go, actually, I need you to just have a bank account, whether or not you have a credit card, now it's 7 out of every 8, right? And it changes the dynamics. It changes the total addressable market. Entrepreneurs and founders often miss that. And they don't think about total addressable market. You've got to have a big, exciting total addressable market. The number's got to be salivating to the investor. He's got to look and go, wow, if we just captured 2.5% of this market share, we would do something really, really amazing.
Yeah, but just to add to that, it's very important that when you start off, is not to look at the total addressable market when you're trying to get your first clients. In my opinion, is really look at who's your perfect client
100%.
before you look at everyone else. So I think here again, the founder needs to make a lot of
100%.
mental shifts in order to be, you know, focus on the total addressable market when you look into the future, when you speak to investors, when you speak to partners, but when you actually are there with your marketing team, with your product team, focus on your, and make a persona. I mean, we have a real persona of our dream client. Make that dream client, hang it, give it a name, call it Salmon Sit or whatever, Sit, sorry. And
I can't emphasize enough how important the point is that you've just made, Alex. I was literally about to say that actually what you need to do is you need an archetype, right? So you need a meet Jerry. Jerry is this age, went to this school, grew up here, likes these things, wants these things, buys these things, lives here, hangs out here, drinks this, drives this, wants this. Jerry is our ideal customer because of these behaviors, right?
Exactly. And this is how the marketing goes.
Yeah. And when you're building your product, you got to have Jerry in mind. When you talk to the investor, you've got to have all the Jerrys in the world in mind, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Guys, I think that's all we have time. In fact, we've gone a bit over time, but that's fine. Vusi, thank you so much for your time. Alex, thank you as always, and look forward to next week's episode.
All right. Thanks, lads. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Vusi. This was a great discussion and very valuable for other entrepreneurs. Really appreciate it.